And a happy hump day to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. It's going to be a quiet stretch of weather as we go into the end of the work week, but as we go into the weekend, there are of course a lot of talking points with your forecast. We'll go over the latest in full detail here. So taking a look at your headlines, a bit more tolerable, but still going to be cold. And then we have another big time cool down, as if we weren't already cold enough, as we go into the end of your weekend. And then the big story is, do we have the possibility of maybe a few flurry showers as we go into Saturday? Future View is right on the line of getting a view of the early morning hours on Saturday, but all of Future View will engulf Saturday as we go throughout the rest of today. So I think this evening is going to be very crucial in order to paint a really good picture about what's going to occur as we go across the course of this weekend. But Saturday is looking like that only day that we are going to have the potential for maybe some winter weather impacts. Other than that, it will be a story of some frigid weather as we roll into the month of February on Sunday and eventually get into Groundhog Day on Monday. So a walk around the quad shows plenty of cloud cover all across central Georgia, with the exception of Dublin, who is seeing plenty of breaks in that cloud cover, and you're also getting plenty of peaks of sunshine. But the temperature right now in Perry, under these mostly cloudy skies, 37 degrees, feels more like 32 degrees. So these numbers have gotten a bit of a head start compared to the last couple of days, and that's because of the cloud cover that continues to be present. 40 degrees, the current temperature reading up here in Macon, but still the eastern United States continues to be a very frigid place right now. 5 degrees in Indianapolis, 33 in Little Rock, 42 in Jackson. But one thing that I am seeing across more of these areas to the north and over to the west of us, a lot of these numbers are already above freezing or making their way up above freezing, which is going to be a very good thing in terms of those areas like, say, Nashville, maybe even getting up into Lexington that have had that ice accumulation. Hopefully they can finally get some temperatures in the forecast that will lead to the melting of all of that ice that has still been standing for a couple of days now. As we look down here in the southeast corner of the United States, you'll see that 40 in Macon, matching the number over in Columbus, 1 degree warmer than Augusta. It's a little bit colder, somewhere in the mid to the upper 30s farther in North Georgia, going down towards Florida, mid 40s, some upper 40s, but all across the southeast in Alabama, South Carolina, Georgia, and into northern Florida and eastern Mississippi. It's a good mixture of some 30s and 40s down here in our corner of the country. And of course, I would imagine that the tip of Florida is probably going to get into the territory where you probably have some temperatures maybe even up into the 50s, the 60s, and of course, eventually the 70s. So here's a look at your central Georgia temperatures, a good mix of the 30s and the 40s like we just saw all across the region. 41 at the warmest, I do believe I spot, and that's in a plethora of areas. Sparta, down to Milledgeville, Gordon, all the way to Dublin, Warner Robins, Unadilla, and everyone else on that I-75 South corridor. And these numbers did in fact start out somewhere in the lower 30s this morning. So they haven't warmed up too much. Areas that are receiving some more sunshine are actually warming up a little bit more than areas that are still holding on to the cloud cover. But the cloud cover did keep the numbers a good deal warmer than, say, starting out in the mid to the upper teens, and even feels like numbers that we had yesterday morning. They got down as low as 2 and 3 degrees up in Monticello and up in Eatonton. Feels like numbers were down in the mid and the upper 20s this morning, which is a very cold environment, but given how we felt the last 2 days, mid-20s are actually feeling a bit more tolerable in terms of what you're walking out the door to. So winds and wind gusts, they have been very stubborn to get out of the forecast. And in fact, we're actually looking at this yellow shade to be a bit more widespread as we go into the afternoon. But right now, a sustained wind, maybe 6 to 10, even 12 miles per hour across certain areas of central Georgia. So that's going to be good enough to continue to make those feels like numbers be below what the actual temperatures sit at. So most of your areas have not really made it across the 40-degree mark. So we have a good mix of some low 30s and some mid 30s, but a few areas that maybe are feeling truer to your actual temperature. In fact, feeling like 44 down in Unadilla. 44 is a good deal warmer than the rest of these numbers that you do see. Only number that gets close to it going to be down to our southeast in Toombs County in Vidalia. So here's a look at your satellite and radar image, actually some talking points with it, because you will start to see some patches of white that are a bit brighter than, say, some of the areas of gray. If you do just see that general gray color, like where I'm kind of pointing right here up into Jones County, northwestern Baldwin County, that's going to indicate some higher level and some thinner cloud cover. So you're getting some ample peaks of sunshine in those areas. However, if you have some denser cloud cover and a little bit of that brighter white shade, areas like Roberta, Peach County, all the way up into Macon County, or excuse me, Macon-Bibb County, and down in Macon County and Taylor County, that's where we are starting to see not as much sunshine in the forecast. So that is going to result in some cooler temperatures as of right now. But cloud cover is pretty widespread. Well, I guess I was going to say widespread. I guess we don't have the satellite imagery on this camera view, which would make sense to why it has been crystal clear over the last couple of days. That's something I'll need to fix, but overall there's no precipitation chances that we need to be talking about in the state of Georgia, and I imagine in the southeast for that matter over the next couple of days. So let's circle back to yesterday. 45 degrees for a high temperature after a morning low temperature of 15 degrees. We were 21 degrees below your average low of 36 yesterday, and still 15 degrees off your average high temperature mark of 60 degrees. So taking a look at the records from yesterday, 79 back in 1949, and your record low temperature, 10 degrees in 1940. We have seen these record low temperatures get mighty low as of recent weeks. 15 degrees, that is the closest we have come to getting into any of that record-breaking territory. However, 15 was just the actual temperature. It doesn't really tell the full story in terms of what it felt like, because we definitely felt colder than 10 degrees that we did have back in 1940. This is when we were pairing it up with those gusty winds present yesterday. We had some single-digit feels-like temperatures around 7, 8, maybe even 9 degrees up here in Macon. But no rain recorded. Your departure of rain somewhere around 1.5 inches below where we should be at this point in January, this point for the entire year. All in all, once again, I'll continue to reiterate this. I'm not too worried about this number having a negative in front of it. Yes, we do need the rain, but we're only about 25, 26 days into the calendar year so far. Wait till we get to our severe weather season. We have those more substantial rainmakers pass through, and of course the more substantial rainmakers passing every couple of days or so during the months of March, April, getting into May. That is going to result in our fair share of some rainfall tallies that will put this number, I imagine, back above where we should be. So not fretting about it too much as of right now. January is typically a pretty dry month in the calendar year. Sunrise 7:32 yesterday and sunset 6:03. I think that sunset has gotten a minute later each and every day since the beginning of the work week, and we will continue to see that number get closer to the 7 p.m. hour by the time we actually wrap up the month of February once we get into the near future. So here's a look at January as a whole, and once again, just like the month of December, it is a tale of two stories. But December was the exact opposite. We started out the month of December very cold. We started out January on a very warm note, especially this stretch from the 6th all the way into the 10th of January. 70s for high temperatures, even 180-degree mark. And of course, you'll continue to see those asterisks on the 9th and the 7th. The 7th, we did break a record high temperature, and we matched the record high temperature back on the 9th. Then we started to see a good fluctuation between some below average and some above average days. And ever since then, really the past, I would say, week and a half, and maybe going back into 2 weeks, it has been a cold stretch with the exception of a couple of days like the 22nd or the 23rd. And even though you do see some days that are slightly above average, they are slightly above average. Your average has lingered around 59 to 60 degrees this time of year. So we're only talking about above average by maybe a degree, 2 or 3. And then as of the last couple of days, high temperatures in the mid 40s that have felt even colder. So that has added the tally up to 12 days below average for the month of January. We go all the way through the rest of the work week with some below average temperatures in the forecast. So I imagine that tally is going to climb above what we do see for the above average numbers. So here's a look at your today graphic, which I won't get into as of too much. We actually have meteorologist Danny De Silva here, who is going to break down future view and what's in store for the rest of the work week. What do you have for us, Danny?
Hey guys, so for the rest of today, we have some cloud cover that's still sticking in, but as we go out into the rest of today, that cloud cover starts to move out pretty quickly. And as you make your way throughout the evening, we're going to see a light patch of cloud cover start to build back in the morning. So as you head out the door, you'll see this thin layer come in, and throughout the day, you'll see an even thicker layer come in. And as we're going out throughout Friday, our major change in the forecast that we're going to see really does start on Friday. You'll wake up in the morning and you'll see a light layer of cloud cover, but we have some more scattered showers start to build in. We actually have a low right now that's starting to form in the Gulf, but it doesn't seem to make its way through central Georgia. It's going to be going around off the coast. So it's providing us with a little bit of moisture, and with the heat of the day, we'll have some scattered light showers throughout the afternoon to the lunch hour, and it'll just still stay pretty light to moderate spread as you go out throughout the evening and towards the nighttime. But that cloud cover is still going to stick around towards the weekend, and we do see a little bit of flurries up to the north of us, and Alex will provide some more information about that later. But for the next 3 days, to sum it up, you'll still want to keep the jacket in the mornings. We are below freezing, Wednesday 28, Thursday 25, so you'll want to keep that jacket as you step out the door, but you won't need as many layers as you get on throughout the day. We're looking at highs in the 50s, and we haven't seen 50s for a little bit. But the main change small change you'll see on Friday is just some light scattered showers as we go out throughout the day, but we still have to factor in this wind gust. So as you make it throughout your day today, you're gonna feel a little bit colder than what it actually is. We have gusts of up to 15, even 20 miles an hour throughout the day, throughout your lunch hour, and as you're making your way back home, you'll feel that, and it'll just contribute to our feels like temperatures that I'll show you in a moment. But tomorrow you'll feel a little bit of a different change as winds begin to calm down just a bit. You can kind of see that in those wind parcel arrows. They're not as fast as they are out east of us, but as we go on into Friday, we'll just see a little bit of a calmer wind situation than we have today, and that's really contributing to your feels like temperatures for the rest of today. It may feel a little bit colder, but as we go into tomorrow morning, it's going to feel like the mid-20s to possibly lower 20s, but that wind does tend to calm down a bit, and those upper 40s, low 50s that we just saw is actually going to feel what it is, and that's going to feel just a lot better than what it has been the last couple of days. Not as frigid as we step out the door, and we see that same pattern continue out on Friday. We're looking at highs yet again in the upper 40s, low 50s. And Alex, those highs right now look like they take a turn towards the weekend.
Yes, you're exactly right, Danny. Those highs do take a turn as we go towards the weekend. So taking a look at Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and then eventually the difference that we do see Saturday and on into Sunday. So obviously we're kind of picking at the short straws when it does come to your forecast over the next couple of days, because we're talking about more tolerable as opposed to less tolerable. It is still going to be cold, don't get me wrong. And as we take a look at your high temperatures over the next couple of days, got to flash it back up to the other graphics computer, we will see 52, 50, 54 each and every one of those afternoons, virtually feeling the same. And the important note is that all of these numbers well below that average of 60 degrees this time of year. And then we get into Saturday and Sunday. If you were tuning in yesterday, you might have heard me talk about Saturday having a good amount of disagreement on the high temperature. In fact, some of the more trustworthy models are saying that we could have some high temperatures below this. We could have some highs maybe around 34 or 35 degrees. However, your longer range models, the GFS and the European, specifically the ones we have been looking at in terms of what type of precipitation are we going to see as we go into Saturday afternoon, they're hinting at some mid-40s. So once again, I've elected to go with more of a middle ground high temperature. If we are a little bit colder, then that's of course going to increase the window that we could be below that magic 32-degree number, even as we go into the afternoon. However, it doesn't make much sense when a lot of the precipitation chances, even of the frozen form for the GFS and the Euro on Saturday, have been lining up to the afternoon time frame when your temperatures are supposed to be in the mid-40s. So that's what I've been really scratching my head about. But obviously one of the other things is wrong, and I do believe that we're actually going to be more so on the lower end of the high temperature scale, maybe somewhere down in the mid to the upper 30s as we go into Saturday. But Sunday, I am pretty confident that we are going to struggle to reach the 40-degree mark. Now we go into your morning lows, like Danny just showed you, a little bit more tolerable, and the feels like temperature is going to be pretty similar to what these actual numbers do read as we go into the weekend. 25 as we start out Saturday morning, so that's what we're going to dip down to as we go Friday night into early on Saturday morning. That is going to be a good amount below that 32-degree number. So there is going to be a window on Saturday morning where the numbers will be below freezing. And of course, that is going to correlate to possibly when some of those flurry showers do begin to pop up in the picture, what we just saw to the north of us, and we'll take a look at what the long-range models do say. And then 16 degrees. We are back into the mid and the upper teens for morning lows as we go into Sunday morning. I imagine we'll have some breezy conditions, and I also anticipate another cold weather advisory as we walk out the door on Sunday morning. So for that morning commute out to church, maybe any plans that you do have on Sunday, you are going to really want to bundle up. Remember those numbers we were talking about yesterday and I was talking about a little bit earlier? That's very likely what's going to greet you out the door on your Sunday morning, especially around 7 to 8, maybe 9 a.m., right there around that window for when we do see the sunrise. So each and every number for the next 5 days, they continue to be below average of 36 for your morning lows and your afternoon high of 60 degrees. We haven't snuffed the 60s in quite some time. Hopefully we do have those in store as we go into the beginning, or to the end of next week, rather, I should say. So here's a look at your long-range models, and I do believe they're trending a little bit later than the window that we could possibly see something of this frozen form of precipitation. But what's going to happen is a low-pressure system is going to form somewhere down in the Gulf. It's going to move over towards Florida. It's going to be right here, kind of in the northeastern corner of the Gulf. Now, the path that it takes as it crosses over Florida and back over into the western Atlantic is going to be kind of the telltale for what we do see in terms of the moisture. So right now, you're going to see a whole lot of green over here, and this is going to indicate your rain, your liquid precipitation. But what we are also seeing is this swath of moisture that's encountering some frigid cold air. So when we do have a low pressure system, you will see it on a graphic that I do have in the future. That's actually going to create that counterclockwise rotation. And what that rotation is going to do, it's going to grab a much colder air mass that is present up to the north and the northeast of us. And as we go across the course of this weekend, it is going to propel it down to the south and down here into the state of Georgia. So what we are going to encounter is, number one, it's going to be some very cold air. I have complete confidence in that forecast, and that is the main thing that you need to know. However, as far as your precipitation chances go, number one, I'm not necessarily buying stock into the timing of what these models are saying. They're saying that we might see something as we go into the afternoon, maybe the evening hours on Saturday, and then that cluster of some frozen precip moves off to the east. But that is important because we are on that westernmost edge of that cluster of moisture, meaning a slight wobble over to the right could result in absolutely nothing for central Georgia, for the state of Georgia, or a slight wobble over to the left could result in maybe a few sustained hours of some flurry showers. So obviously the smallest little bit of fluctuation could make all the big difference in our forecast, and we'll talk about what those fluctuations could be and which ones will pertain to our forecast as far as those wintry precipitation chances and which one is looking more likely than the other. So here's a look at Wednesday at 4 p.m. I know I jumped ahead into the future quite a while, but I did want to show you that we do have signs of our next rainmaker that will be on its way as we go into the midway portion of next week. Looks like sometime maybe later Wednesday, getting into Thursday morning, or maybe even as late as Thursday afternoon. But I think that's going to be the next time that you need to plan to break the rain jacket back out of the forecast, or back out of the closet. And in terms of the temperatures, they do look to be a good deal warmer than what we do have present this weekend. So I'm not expecting anything in the way of wintry weather. We can see some shades of that behind the banner way up to the north, and that is going to indicate that much of the southeast is going to see a warmer spell of weather into the midway portion of next week. So let's take a zoomed in view for central Georgia and talk about the GFS and the European model solutions, where the GFS is actually kind of backing off the chances of seeing some wintry weather. As of yesterday, it was the one that showed a good swath of some of those flurry showers moving into central Georgia. But right now, it's looking like the window for any of that would be Saturday night, maybe into the early evening hours on Saturday. Depending on our temperatures throughout the day, I'm not inclined to necessarily believe this, and especially not the GFS model, one of the ones that forecasted a high of 45 throughout your Saturday afternoon. But it does look like Saturday, once again, going to be that window for possible wintry weather. And now let's take a look at the European, which they have done a complete flip-flop. The European was not very bullish on anything in the way of frozen precip yesterday. Now it is showing a good portion, good chunk of east and northeast central Georgia could see a couple of flurries as we go into the afternoon hours on Saturday. Once again, the European model forecasted a high of around 46 for Saturday afternoon. So obviously something's not necessarily lining up here, but then as we go into the nighttime hours, all that moisture is moving off to the east. But we are right there on the westernmost edge of this band. And like I mentioned, it's all dependent on the path that the center of low pressure takes. So if it takes path number 1, rides up the coast a little bit closer to home, we're going to be closer to the center of circulation with this, which means we are going to be closer to the swath of moisture that is surrounding the center of low pressure. That scenario, if we take path number 1, that's going to result in the chance of some snow flurries, really mainly in east central Georgia. Now, if we take path number 2 with this low pressure system, which is looking more likely as of right now, that is going to cross over more so the central portion of the Florida Peninsula, and it's going to swing out to sea a little bit farther. The farther away from coast that this low pressure system is, that's going to mean the moisture is farther away from us, and that's still going to send a fair share of some snow flurry showers and even some snow accumulation to areas like Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina that kind of jet out into the Atlantic Ocean a little bit more than, say, we do here in Georgia. But once again, this low pressure system is going to cross over Florida, and it's going to ride up the eastern coast of the United States. It's just a matter of how close away that center of circulation will be from us. And taking a look at kind of a graphic that is depicting the chance of maybe even some minor impacts with this. This is why I continue to say that the likelihood is very low. I would say the chances are a little bit greater than what I did see yesterday. However, it's not going to be for all of central Georgia. Just like we were talking about with your potential ice impacts last weekend, we were saying mainly to the north of Macon, those are going to be the areas that do have the potential for maybe up to 1/4 inch of an ice. Very thankfully, we didn't see anything besides maybe a light glaze in a select few spots. Well, this looks like an even slimmer margin of areas. Take a look at this blue shade, encompassing areas like Washington County, maybe getting close to Milledgeville and Baldwin County, Hancock County, Putnam, Jasper, and maybe stretching over into areas closer to Augusta. That's only a 10 to 30% chance. That's even lower than the chances that we had as of last weekend. You can start to see this yellow area creep into northeastern Hancock County, and that's still only a 30 to 50% chance of seeing some minor impacts. So right now, the likelihood still does remain very, very low, but you can see the theme with this. If you live to the northeast, you live over to the east, in central Georgia, that's where you are going to have the greatest chance of impacts. I'm talking about Wrightsville. I could even be talking about Dublin possibly. I'm talking about Milledgeville. I'm talking about Sparta, Sandersville. You guys are going to have the potential for maybe some impacts, but even while you have the greatest potential, it is still a rather low chance. If you are watching from Macon, if you are watching from Warner Robins, Vienna, Montezuma, Roberta, Forsyth, Cochran, Rochelle, all of these areas farther over to the west of what I just talked about, you are not going to see the impacts from this. So I want to go ahead and preface that right now, because when we give a forecast, a lot of you do think that that's a forecast for all of central Georgia. No, a lot of these weather systems are only confined to impacting a select few spots. That's what we saw with the last system. That's what we tried to emphasize. Macon northward, that's where you see the impacts. But obviously that does get lost in translation a lot of times. Many posts are very misleading. There's a lot of different information getting thrown out there. So I do understand how that message gets lost in translation. But here's your notice right now. East and northeast central Georgia, that's going to be the areas that have the potential to be impacted by this. If you live farther over to the west, still a little bit up in the air about how much farther over to the west, but I'm definitely saying areas like Thomaston and Butler, Roberta, even as far over as Macon, we're not looking at a good likelihood of impacts whatsoever. But of course, we could see some wiggle and wobble like I alluded to, so things could change. But the main takeaways, that was a lot of yapping, a lot of different colors, a lot of different graphics. These are the main things you need to know. As of this morning, chances of seeing anything are still low, but they are definitely non-zero. And the chances of seeing anything, once again, greater over to the east, because areas over to the east are closer to the center of that low pressure that will be off in the Atlantic. If we see anything, we're just talking about some light flurries and some very light accumulation. The National Weather Service has highlighted about a ½ inch of accumulation. That is less accumulation than we saw as of 2 weekends ago, when we did have a couple of flurry showers that resulted in actually about 1 to 2 inches of snow in most areas, maybe even some isolated pockets of 3. We're talking about even lighter accumulation than that. We might not even have enough white from the snow to cover the ground and cover things like the grass that you do see in your front yard if you do see anything. So there is high confidence in very cold air and the precipitation type. So what that means is, like I told you, that cold air mass is going to get pulled down, but from the circulation of that low pressure center. So we do have very high confidence that some very cold air is entering the forecast, which also in turn gives us high confidence in the precipitation type. If any moisture does line up kind of with when these cold temperatures are going to arrive as we get into the weekend, it is going to be in the form of snow. So we have a high confidence that there will be snow over in the eastern part of the United States throughout this weekend. It's just a matter of how far over to the west do those snow chances creep. So that's why we have a low confidence in the location of where that snow is going to be. Again, the sub-freezing temperatures are going to be there, but now we need it to line up with where the moisture swath is going to be. And that's all going to be dependent on the track of that low pressure system, which we will continue to keep you updated on as we go about the course of the next couple of days and as we head into the weekend. So your 7-day forecast is really not seeing any change. Again, these rain chances on Friday, that's going to be something that you are going to have to maybe duck and dodge a little bit before these possible wintry precipitation chances. 20% chance of rain. Right now it's looking like the afternoon hours all the way into the evening and trying to taper off as we go into the nighttime hours. And it's only going to be a couple light showers, but something I promise you that you will want the rain jacket for, especially with a high temperature of 54 on Friday. That is only going to get colder as you go into the evening hours. We do have a good window right now of seeing some sub-freezing temperatures, maybe even all throughout your Saturday. Right now, I am thinking that this 39 is probably going to be a little bit lower. Like I said, it's more of a middle ground high temperature right now, just due to the drastic disagreement amongst the models. But I wouldn't be surprised that this pops down to maybe say 35 or 36 for a high temperature, which means that is going to shorten the window that we pop above that 32-degree mark throughout the afternoon. However, we are still forecasted to be just slightly above freezing temperature as we go into the afternoon, but I don't necessarily believe the timing of the GFS and the European models. I do believe that, or actually I believe the European, rather I should say. The GFS is in the afternoon, but the European kind of gets going a little bit earlier in the day. That's when I think the window is going to be best for anything in the way of some snow showers. It's going to be really early on Saturday morning. It doesn't look like anything's going to pop up on Friday, but right now I'm still just throwing a rain chance on there because I'm not trying to overblow the hype whatsoever, and there's still a good amount of uncertainty when it does come to this. But once we get the high resolution models within view, we have a better prediction of this, and if we do have a good idea and a good confidence that at least some areas of central Georgia are going to see some potential flurry showers, then we would issue a weather impact alert. But right now, we're not too confident in it. We need some more data to back up our confidence as of right now. But then we go into the beginning of February, then go into Groundhog Day. The bigger story that all of you, this is going to be the part of the forecast that does apply to all of you, not just areas over to the east. Everyone is going to get downright blistering cold once again as we go into Sunday morning. 16 degrees for a morning low. Feels like temperatures are likely to be even lower, maybe even down into the single digits again. And then 39 for a high temperature on Sunday afternoon. I believe we're going to struggle to make it to the 40-degree mark throughout your Sunday afternoon plans. And as we kickstart the month of February, just the same way we're ending the month of January. Let's go into Monday, which is going to be Groundhog Day. Big day for Beauregard Lee up in Jackson, Georgia. 20 degrees for a morning low temperature. I was joking around about it yesterday, but I'm kind of serious about it at the same time. 20 degrees, as that groundhog is waking up and walking out of his burrow, I'm sure he's going to feel those temperatures and he is going to look away from his shadow. He does not want to see that shadow. He wants this blistering cold spell to end, hopefully. So keeping our fingers crossed that he does predict maybe an early spring on the horizon, not 6 more weeks of winter, because I don't think personally your weather team could take 6 more weeks of what has been the forecast over the last couple of weeks. But nonetheless, all jokes aside, we will get a pretty quick warming trend, especially with your afternoon values. 48 for a high temperature. I know that's not quite too warm. I know 54 is not quite too warm, but it does look like we are jumping up back into the 50s, and I don't really see any signs of any weather makers until we get later into Wednesday, maybe even getting into later Thursday, as we saw in the long-range models. That was the next rainmaker I wanted to go ahead and throw on your radar. So when that front comes through, it might usher in another colder air mass towards the end of next week. But before that, I would imagine that these numbers are probably going to continue to climb into the mid to maybe the upper 50s, maybe even the low 60s before that front does sweep through. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that there's a little bit of relief as we go into the back half of your 7-day forecast. But there is a lot to look forward to. Obviously, everyone's going to be looking forward to our prognosticator's prediction as we go into Monday morning. We'll continue to keep you updated with all things groundhog, but until then, don't get too hyped up about the potential for some snow this weekend. Chances are still looking low, and if that does change, we will of course be letting you know over the course of the next 24 hours. But later today, we should have a much better idea about how this weekend will pan out. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 11 a.m.